I think for me, there's this whole new generation of athletes um, who are very much into social media, who are in some sense born into it. But for me, as somebody who's been not born into the social media era, and I find it very strange and very different because there are many good things which come out with the social media, but also a lot of new challenges which have come up. And for me, to look at it, I'm seeing players uh, who would play the match and within minutes they're on social media. I would see many of them not reflecting enough and spending too much time on the likes and the comments of the social media. So it just becomes a big challenge. And I think it's something which at least the athletes or people who are in high performance sport should really look into, because it's something which will definitely affect performances. I really liked what Dhoni had said. It's like uh, the important thing is to play the sport and leave the rest of the things. And for me, Boria, when I spoke to you a long time back, 2 years ago, literally, or um, in some sense in my own career, I think the only good thing or the fallback thing was that I knew how to coach. And I think that's the biggest asset which I have. And when I spoke to you, that's all I remembered, because for me, writing and being passionate about journalism was and storytelling was what you had. And it was most important to get that piece back, because the rest of the things will fall in place by themselves. The worst thing which can happen is that we lose hope. And the worst thing our enemies can do to us is to push us to a place where we don't have the motivation. Because in some sense, the words of one of the coaches whom I respected told me long time back is that you know how to make honey, and if people take the honey away, it doesn't matter, because you can make new honey. I think that's how I really look at it, because for me, as professionals who know a certain feat, it's important that we just keep doing that, because eventually that is what will get us back on track. And for me, that was very, very important.
One question, that something that you mentioned the other day, that however much a coach or a mentor or a a journalist or anybody in the ecosystem can be right, but it is almost a given that it is the athlete who will garner the sympathy. Can you just elaborate a bit on that? Because that's something that I found extremely instructive, because there are always two sides: the coach's side, the mentor side, the administrator's side, the journalist side, but it is not ever looked into on social media.
Well, I think in general, it's not only in social media, but also in the outside world, especially in India, because the ecosystem is still very nascent in the sporting segment, that everybody is looking at the athlete, and sympathies are always in the athlete when the athlete says, I've been wronged. Because for long, I think athletes in our country have never got their due, or have never been respected, or have in some sense also been abused by a lot of people in the ecosystem growing up. It's only now that sport in general, and I would really give credit to the central government for bringing these things in the last, say, 10, 15 years, in fact, where sport has actually grown tremendously. And now it's very different. But somehow, when an athlete says, I have been wronged, people don't really look at the entire picture, and they just jump to the conclusions that the administrator is always wrong or the coach is always wrong. And I think that always garners sympathies to the athlete, not only from social media, but also from, um, say, the people, say, if you go to court, or you are represented at the central government or to the ministry, I think everybody is like, okay, पहले athlete को कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए, वो because I remember there was a coach who had a certain allegation, and before the allegation was even substantiated, the first thing was just remove the coach first. And I think those kind of things actually are not good for the ecosystem from a coach's perspective. So you have coaches who are just playing safe. I just don't want the player to complain, and they almost become subservient to the player, and that's not a good scenario at all. So you want to be conscious of that, and in a more developed sporting ecosystem, I think each one of their roles are respected a lot more. In our country at the moment, we are still getting to athletes being respected, but tell me, how many administrators do we really admire? Or how many have we actually said these are great administrators? How many coaches have we really said they're great? And I'm probably the only lucky one who actually is in that space where people respect me. But how many other coaches do we actually have in that space? So storytellers, I think journalists who have contributed a lot. And I have a lot of my journalist friends who have said, I have supported this athlete growing up from an age of 11. And there's no respect for me, because when nobody was there for him, I was there for him. And today, they don't even bother. So I think there's a lot of sides to the stories, which contribute to an athlete's success. And somewhere down the line, all those people who have contributed are not really respected in the ecosystem still. And I think it's time that when sports awards are given and sports recognitions are given, it's time that we actually start recognizing these people and helping or contributing or celebrating their successes as well.
Final question. I mean, all of this, in doing so, because we don't listen to other perspectives or other sides, families can get impacted, mental health can get impacted, uh, people can get destroyed. The thing that you just said at the start, that people tend to lose hope, give up on their professions, give up on their lives, and entire families who are not even part of that process, they also get destroyed. The mother, the wife, the daughter, the father. How do we address such a scenario?
I think there's a lot more happening on the mental side than I think what we even can decipher or acknowledge. And I do believe that a lot of things and a lot of kids are being impacted a lot. And especially if you're in public space, I think although we might think that we are protecting the families, and I see this happen with my own family as well. I think the signals which they get, they're very aware of things, and protecting them is very going to be very, very tough and difficult. So I think we have to recognize that we are in a space which is very difficult because of the family as well, because I can take the load, but the family is like, what did they do to actually deserve this kind of hate or this kind of um, abuse? And I think there's no clear answer for it, but truly I think we need to kind of help each other in that sense, and at the end of the day, um, I think get stronger, because this is going to stay. And the younger generation, in some sense, they're much better off at handling this than the older generation in some sense. So I think the positives there, but I think it's a new age where a lot of gray areas, and we need to be aware that when we say something, it has a long impact on many other things around, and we need to be sensitive of all that.